Hello humans, Master Dinnerflex here, bringing you the low quality content you deserve. And today I'm going to be going over the ultimateness that is the monstrosity that Dueling Book has released, the custom card options. So I actually really think this is unbelievably cool. So the format is so stale that I don't really give a crap that they're even making this, because if the game isn't interesting, then let the players spice it up their own way possible, and custom cards are a good way to do that. Now, this is very new, so a lot of players are making cards not understanding problem-solving card decks, or not understanding card design in general. Like, I ran into players who would make a Link 2 monster with 4 arrows, not understanding the whole point of a Link rating is to say how many arrows it has. They also don't understand, like, they'll make cards that in theory only support their deck, but in all reality, if I put those cards in any deck, it's an FTK. So they'll make cards too powerful with no restriction, not realizing I could just do that in mine. Yeah, there are some people who are just gonna make a card that says when this card is in your deck, you win the duel. But those people, like, I'm not gonna say they're rude, because you can do that. That's the whole point of that room. But if you're actually wanting to play like a custom card format, you need to think logically on how to build your cards. And there's a lot of flaws with card design that people do. Like, the people designing the cards that don't make any sense, they're also the kind of people that complain about Konami designing bad cards, but they're far worse at it. A perfect example is if your card is removal, like if it's spot removal or mass removal, or I should just say spot removal, if it doesn't target, does it do one of these three things? Does it have a cost? Does it have a condition? Or does it require setup? If you have non-targeting removal that doesn't have either of those three things, it would never be a realistic option for that to ever come out. Because all the non-targeting removal cards have those three things, and usually they'll have multiples of those things on them. And people will just make a card that says, send this card to the graveyard, and they make it searchable. Well, Sky Strikers are one of the best decks, and most of their removal is targeting. You gotta think about card design like that. And also keep in mind, if this is supposed to support your deck, if I could put this in any other deck and it be better, then it's also not well designed. Like, a perfect example is Destiny Hero Malicious. It's not a well-designed card because I don't have to play Destiny Heroes to play that. And I've ran into decks where it's like Gravekeepers, and all of the new cards I've seen them play, the only effect they had is summon from the deck. And it was like a tuner with no restriction that summoned any Gravekeeper from the deck, and it also summoned a Gravekeeper that could summon from the deck to go into a synchro monster that summoned from the deck. Keep in mind, if I could just put that in anything, it's not well designed. It also doesn't support your deck, because I could put that in any deck and it'd be way better than Gravekeepers. And here's like a perfect example. Arcfiend Chemist. It is a Herald of Orange Light that, instead of discarding it and another fairy, I can discard it, destroy it, and then I have to send an Arcfiend from my deck to the graveyard. So there's this massive problem with this card. You would never play this in Arcfiends because you would never play Arcfiends. So what you do with this card is you activate this from your hand, negate a monster effect for free, and then send Eris to search another one. And because this person forgot that hard ones per turns are on cards for a reason, you can activate the next one and send another random Arcfiend that probably has some kind of effect. So card design is really important, And you need to think, if I can play this in any other deck and it be better than the deck it's intended, it's not well designed. Another thing I noticed with cards like the custom cards, if they're not horribly unbalanced, they're either anime, like based on anime effects, which is kind of boring. You think you would like try, like, it's okay to make an archetype of anime, but their effects are like, they're not very clever. Like, they're super straight to the point, or they're really bad because they're trying to mimic the anime. Like this one, it has an effect when destroying dark zombies. Like, that's not that entertaining. You could do something completely different. Like, you could have the archetype like based on evolving, like Ichigo, where you could get him to Soul Reaper, and like kind of like a level monster where he levels up when he puts on the Hollow Mask and stuff like that. Or you could do something completely different where like the Soul Reapers, I don't know, just like anything. Or they're kind of like kaijus without tripping their stuff. You give your opponents hollows, and then the Soul Reapers run them over, and that's how you actually do damage, because they can't do damage to non-hollow monsters or something like that. Like, you could be way more clever with some of these cards, and I know I'm kind of preachy about this. I've made 5 custom cards, and I think a few of them are still very imbalanced, but I feel like the more we start testing them, the better they're going to get, the higher quality they're going to get, the more logical they're going to get. More people will understand card design much better, and I think this is why it's a very good tool, is because this will help the players identify, like, if this goes on for a while, this will help players identify what's a good, broken, unfair, or just bad cards. Like, they'll understand the level of power that card should be, whether it's because it's too powerful or not powerful enough. And that's why I think this is a really great tool. But you've seen this on the screen already. I think when searching through all those custom cards, I haven't searched through all of them, just a decent amount, I found probably the best designed archetype in there, and it's based on Barnyard. I read over the cards. First off, these are some of the only cards that have hard once per turn clauses on them, which is important when you're making a card. And like, it's really interesting because all their effects are very much like Madolche's, where they do their kind of own thing, like how Magdalene doesn't interact with every card, and Messengelato doesn't interact with every card, but there are certain stepping stones that you go through where they end up all working together. And I think that's really, really interesting. It's a resource, it's like a +1/+2 kind of combo deck, but it doesn't over combo. Like, there's a lot of restrictions on them to keep them from being unfair. And I think that's hilarious. Someone actually thought out a well-designed archetype, and like this whole thing, and I think that's hilarious, and it's based on Barnyard. So like, this is something you want to have on most, if not every single card, and if it doesn't have this, its effect needs to be very mediocre. And this is important. It's kind of like what I was saying with special, like people just putting so many special summon from the deck clauses on their cards. Like, special summoning from the deck is one of the best ways to get to a monster. Like, it's literally the best way to get to a monster. And that's really unfair if you can just keep doing it. And it's unfair to the point where I could just put it in my deck, and you haven't really designed an archetype, you designed an engine. But when you're putting all these restrictions on them, it means you have to think it out. You can't just constantly like Arcfiend loop with it. There's a reason they've made all these cards. There's a reason they made like hard once per turn restrictions. Yeah, it's like this is a very well thought out archetype. I think there's only one card that I think is questionable. It's this one because if you just gather, like there are cards in here that let you gather a whole bunch of these, and I think that could kind of be a cheesy OTK, which I've never been a fan of just random OTKs like opening triple honest. But again, at the same time, that's probably whatever. The deck doesn't do anything really unfair. Like, it doesn't have counter trap cards. None of its cards are actually that bloated. Like, you can read most of them with like a page, which is good. Which is a thing I didn't mention. Sometimes when people design custom cards, it's just a wall of bloat text, which is what I call a bloated card. They have made a card with so many effects you can't be bothered to read it, which is actually even worse because people don't understand problem-solving card text. And the reason all these colons and brackets are here is because they're eye catchers. They let your opponent see where the clauses start. They let them see when an effect is activating. They let them see the relevant stuff in a card. But if it's just like a wall, like if you have to scroll down like 4 different times to read everything, no one's going to bother reading that. Not only that, there's a good chance that all those effects on there are pretty unfair naturally, and it's not a well-designed card anyways, so that's another type of card I have issues with. And the final thing I say I'll have issues with, which is like all these things, like I'm not the best card designer. I've made like 5, and some of them still need work. But I got an understanding on how to balance cards, just in general. If your deck, if you design an entire deck, your deck, it's of course you want to put a win condition, but you need to make it to where your deck can lose. You need to make it to where your deck can still lose. I've run into opponents that have just like random clauses on their card that if I just completely out-resource them, they could go +4 for me winning. And it's like graveyard effects. Or like I ran into an opponent who had a field spell that he could synchro summon from the deck by banishing materials from his deck for the synchro summon during my battle phase, and all of his cards got effect when banished. Like, you need to let your deck actually lose for it to be well designed. Like, just putting all these clauses on the card that says cannot be destroyed by battle, cannot be destroyed by card effects. If you have no card, if you control no cards, you can special summon 3 monsters from the deck. You can't do that. That's not. You need to have an opportunity to lose when you're making cards. And it's kind of like a hard thing to do, especially if you're proud of a deck you've created. But you need to be able to lose. You need to be a good sport about like card design, which is kind of funny. You need to logically think, if I can't lose with this deck, I don't want to play against it. Like, I guess that's the ultimate thing about all of these cards that are being designed. If you don't want to play against it, no one else does either. So yeah, that's about it. The only thing I really can say about all this is design your cards responsibly. Like, if you want to have a game where it's just like banish 10 cards, draw 3, or just like, if you just want to have absolutely non-balanced Yu-Gi-Oh!, that's fine too, because that room is made to be abused as well. Like, there are going to be trolls that are just playing like bullshit crap, and that's fine, because that's what you signed up for when playing in a custom cards room. But yeah, that's basically it. I just had a lot of things to say over this. Just logically think about your cards, look at cards being currently made, and look at cards that have been made, and if you see a problem occurring with your deck, where I guess the simple thing to put it is, if one card alone lets you go more than +2 at max, then it probably shouldn't be there. Like, there are even cards like that in the TCG that are real that do that, but people identify them as problems. And even if they do that, they usually still require setup. And if yours don't do that, then there probably isn't a realistic expectation. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you all for watching. And remember, Master Dinner Flax will take your soul.